we presented a whole bunch of interesting things that then we could go into more detail later on, depending on what's interesting for everyone. Like for example, when we look at the autonomic nervous system, which isn't really just spinal, the spine is the pathway, but it's really, you have these nerves that either are sent from the sensors that travel through here, and then they land here, and then they come from here, and then they get sent back to, okay, I need to order this to do this or do that automatically or by control. So anyone who's facilitating, holding space, or giving trainings, if you're not establishing connections between these, then it doesn't make sense. When you think about the circadian rhythms or the sleep stages or the wake stages, it's connected. Like the cycles of wake and sleep helps to coordinate the autonomic nervous system. Do you see what I mean? It's connected. The autonomic nervous system helps you to control your functions from digestion, immunity, metabolism, heart rate control, breathing patterns, because you're not breathing in the same way the whole day. Your heart isn't always the same. Sometimes it's a certain part of the song or not. So this is evolution. This is the story. The ancient story is the wave. Do you understand? You're not linear. There are certain times in the day where you're going to be up or down, but for those living in places like Europe where things are seasonal, the night is longer or the day is longer depending on the year. You actually have a wave, and you want to respect the wave. But that wave is changing so fast right now. Yes. That wave is changing so fast right now. It's beautiful. Yeah, when you look at it, wow, okay, the story is wave-based, it's earth-based, and now people who travel, people who live in different parts of the world, like, okay, like us, certain times of the year we're in the Philippines and then we come to Europe. We're changing the wave. So why do some people travel then? Why do some people live in different parts of the world? They're mixing up the waves. Because you can have a more global circadian system. So people who don't travel, they eat certain kinds of food that belongs to different parts of the world, like Indian food, Indonesian food, because you're borrowing some of their wave. We're actually mixing up the waves. So only recently, through cheap airline flights and the internet and the iPod, and now these practices, you're mixing up the menu. When people were used to only certain neurons connecting with each other, only in the last 30 to 20 to 10 years, that mixture, you chose to be alive at the very time when very, very slowly, hundreds of millions of years, suddenly it just kept increasing, boom. You are alive at the time it exploded. All of the dualities started to come together. When I look at this from an inner dance perspective, it just blows me away. The fact that we can touch the autonomic nervous system like that. Something so old is being reprogrammed almost overnight. And people think it's a workshop. People think it's a session. It's not. It's a reprogramming of something super old, almost overnight. So when people do say, that changed my life, what do they mean? This is it. You're changing the earth system programmed inside you to hold all of it. Because you know the problem with human beings, they make too many decisions all the time. They walk into a room. Is this okay? Not okay. You're getting them to a point where everything's okay. It's all good. My point being, put these two models together, the autonomic nervous system and the circadian system. Now, let's try to see where some of this doesn't need to be so complex. I mentioned this yesterday. Your body has a clock that manages the autonomic nervous system and the circadian rhythms. So if you want to know who's the driver of the car, who's in control, it's that almond-shaped and almond-sized part of the brain called the hypothalamus. It's the center of control for both the endocrine and the nervous system, most especially the autonomic nervous system. I'm not going to ask you to memorize all the parts of the hypothalamus. These are regions. But then when you open it up, it gives explanations on all of these things that are signals that you know. You remember the Lord of the Rings? One ring rules them all. That's the hypothalamus. Oxytocin, the love drug. Okay, so the endocrine glands are the glands that secrete inwards. The exocrine glands, like the sweat glands, the tear glands, they secrete outwards. So the endocrine glands send messages to each other to establish, are you safe? Are you in love? Are you angry right now? And so the hypothalamus sends signals to everyone. Spiritual people, chakra systems, right? Okay, crown, expression, insight, and it's all mapped out according to color. You know, the pituitary, the pineal, the thyroid, the thymus, the adrenal, the reproductive is called the gonads. The root would be more connected to the digestive system, which would be the pancreas. Your endocrine glands have colors. So, you know, a lot of you know when you're talking about power or you're talking about expression, talking about knowledge, integration, love, it's all mapped out. So what I'm giving you right now is the incredible, interesting factoid that one gland rules them all. The ring of power. You can be Frodo. So the hypothalamus, most of all, this is what you're most interested in, having talked about the circadian system. The suprachiasmatic nucleus holds the clock. Okay? So the hypothalamus sends orders to, you know what they call the third eye. There's a third eye in the brain. And what is that? It's called the pineal gland. It was Descartes, that French philosopher, who said the pineal gland is the third eye. But he didn't say why, because he lacked the neuroscience. So the pineal gland's main function is to send out melatonin, which allows people to dream. So when you're awake for too long and you haven't slept, melatonin builds up. And then there's this tendency for you to try to go to sleep to balance out. So the main signal carrier for that belongs to the pineal system. So when you get people to lay down and to close their eyes, no matter what time of the day, you're actually getting them to pretend that I'm going to go to sleep. You're finding a way to switch on the melatonin system unnaturally, outside of the normal wave. That's why people are having these experiences, because that's the meaning of the pineal gland being the actual spiritual doorway of the brain, because it brings people into the dream. And so it's, yeah, the pineal system does that, but the one that sends the signal to the pineal gland that it's time to go to sleep is the hypothalamus. So when it's light out, the hypothalamus would know, okay, it's not time. Or, you know, that's why a lot of people who have these really bad timings, and you know a lot of them, they're people who work the graveyard shift. doctors and call center agents, they're ruining the clock. And people who live in big cities where it's never night because there's fake lighting. There's electric lighting. 300 years ago, when we invented these, we started to destroy the natural clock. So in places like Paris, Dubai, Manila, the clock is now weird. Amsterdam, it's weirded out since we invented these machines. Then people are looking at these lights. The clock changed. And so the hypothalamus is actually, and the pineal system, they're going into massive transformations. Like coffee, people drink coffee at night. It's changing what took so long to program in the last 200, 300 years. Like, it was studied that people didn't actually drink this much coffee. They brought it over from Turkey, from that part of the world, and when they got stimulated, they were going into these other states of consciousness that belong to different parts of the world, that belong to India or China.
Sufis used coffee as well.
Yeah.
In their rituals.
So it seems like, especially the West, is getting exposed to these excitatory or inhibiting. There's 3 kinds of drugs traditionally that you can ingest. What are they? For those who haven't done the online processes, what are the 3 categories of drug? There's basically the stimulant, the upper, and then there's the depressant, which is the downer. And then what's the third drug? There's actually 4, but let's talk about the third. The third is the hallucinogenic or the psychedelic. So what is a hallucinogenic or psychedelic? It's a drug that holds stimulants and depressants at the same time. Anything that brings you up and down creates that extreme state. So you don't need magic mushrooms, don't need ayahuasca, you just need a lot of coffee and a lot of wine. Take them together, you will go there. You will confuse it. The sun and the moon are there at the same time. It's raining and it's super hot out, I'm so confused. That's a psychedelic. That's what magic mushrooms does. It relaxes you while it poisons you. So it's driving something upwards. There's a reaction mechanism to the psilocybin that's holding you down. Okay, let go. But then it's raising something up. So now think of the workshop. It's the same thing. You hold them down. Close your eyes. Lay down. The reason why inner dance and Kundalini works is this. Especially when you ask someone to go into the middle of the room. Like, oh, fuck. Shit. Then your heart starts beating. You're anxious. Okay, what if something happens? What if nothing happens? And they're all looking at me. But you ask them to lay down. And as soon as they close their eyes, you're already activating the melatonin system. You're already relaxing them, but it's too late. They're also scared. So you're stimulating them and you're depressing them at the same time. And what do you get? A magic mushroom experience on the carpet. So one of the biggest tools facilitators are using is fear. They're taking anxiety, but they're making people go into paralysis so that they can't escape. They're actually relaxing, but they're also scared. So that's chemistry. You're intermixing dopamine, and the downer would be acetylcholine, serotonin is a downer, adrenaline is an upper. So you don't need the drug. And then you're putting music to back it. You have relaxing music, but somewhere inside you have this enervating, triggering music. You know, those are the 2 mechanisms. You open and then you trigger. You open, okay, is it safe? But then, okay, wake up, boom. That's how we are affecting, regulating, dysregulating the autonomic nervous system and the circadian rhythms. It's so interesting once it's verbalized. Is it as simple as that? So all of this talk about power, transmission, I'm amazing, it's not true. Some of the theatrics that people do, it's actually not necessary. Just through the simple proprioception, positioning the body. These are the states of conditions you were asking earlier. What are the states of conditions where healing can happen? If people are hiding or lodging something, open them up. But then triggering them enervates that so that a release can happen. It's something to do with the autonomic nervous system and the circadian rhythms.
Is that depends on the subject or the person, how much fear in them when you bring them out of a situation like this?
Yeah.
So the movement, it goes further out, and somebody who's more calm or relaxed,
most people
gets less.
Exactly. It depends, for example, on problems. Do people have problems? Are they running away? Are they able to confront it? But a lot of people, they're not actually problematic. That means they're not needing to be in a state of transformation because they're stable. So
that's what I'm trying to think, because why I'm not that I don't move.
Yeah, because
I approach situation, I'm very calm to approach anything.
You're in a stable spot. You're okay where you're at. You don't need to change. But and then there are those people, I'm not okay right now, so I need the support so I can move through the other side. So there needs to be separate mechanisms for all of these, right? Are you stable or are you moving?
I'm just thinking about the facilitator who used fear. So
Yeah.
are they sensing people sitting in the gathering?
Yeah.
The feared ones.
Yeah.
They will choose to activate.
Yeah.
More.
Yeah.
They will sense it.
It becomes the model.
Yeah.
They put that in the middle, and people start to compare. And then, why am I not doing the same thing?
It's in the training that choose the one who is already sensitive and looks active, and put that person in the middle to showcase it. It also does help others to, when you see the kind of, but then it also blocks the ones who are to have expectations and comparisons, right?
Even in media, I think what people need to post are people who aren't moving. And then Tassimo, I went in the cosmos. But because the media is filled with all of these images of people moving, and then the testimonials, it's not balancing out. I think what's needed is, okay, you're just okay there, but actually some things, that needs to.
Yesterday, and I was up there somewhere.
That needs to be modeled, and is not being modeled right now.
And I was moving, but I was feeling quite
And I was moving and feeling very zen inside.
There you go.
Okay.
That's everything.
Yeah.
Amazing. So back to the hypothalamus. That one ring, just through that one perspective is one thing. The endocrine system works through axes or axis. So, okay, like a lot of you know what the thyroid is. It helps with, it symbolizes communication, but its actual function has something to do with metabolism. The thymus is the endocrine gland with the heart. And then the adrenal system is the yellow. So when you look at the thyroid alone, it actually means much, but not that much when you try to understand the connections. What makes this simple is there's an axis, so there's something called the hypothalamic pituitary thyroid axis, or the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, or the hypothalamic pituitary gonad axis, which should be the ovaries or the breasts for the women, and it would be the testes for the men. What I'm trying to point out to you is that you do have these pathways that's coming from the one ring. It's such a cool analogy. The one gland. So especially when you're sleeping, all of those signals are now saying, okay, she's not busy. He's just resting. I now can heal. I now can send catabolic or anabolic metabolic processes where I can break down all of the shit, the merde, The so that I can create new proteins and new building blocks from that, right? Music affects the hypothalamus. So the work that you're doing affects everything. You can see where that substantiates that the one thing that you're doing affects everything else, because it establishes rhythms, patterns.
In what way is it affecting the hypothalamus?
The music?
Yeah, is it mostly the rhythm, or what does it respond to?
So time and space, rhythm belongs to time because it determines how fast or how slow you sequence. Space has to do with everything happening all at once. So in music, you call that harmony. Harmony is when you bring many notes together, many frequencies together. So rhythm is about time, harmony is about space, and when you dance across harmony and rhythm, you have melody. So that's where the body is a song. The breath holds harmony. You bring many elements together. The heart establishes rhythm, and the brain allows you to navigate across all of those. Brain, breath, and blood, harmony, rhythm, melody. So when you use these devices, and then you're trying to affect the hypothalamus, I think that's why music was invented so long ago, because it held memory. You go to a specific area, there's a certain BPM. Just travel. As soon as you land, the airplane lands, you're going through immigration, the vibe, there's a rhythm here. That's not the same as where I came from. The hypothalamus does that autonomically.
So it's like the antenna for that vibe.
Yes. And that it's always been holding the music, establishing your clock, which regulates your mood, your appetites, your... So what I'm doing here now is I'm substantiating. I'm creating the science that will allow you to establish safety. That it's okay what we're doing because we're healing everything through the one ring that rules them all. The practice that you're interested in will, if you balance it out, anyhow, it will affect everything. Behavior, thought, language. You see what I mean? The axis starts there with what holds the clock.
Does the hypothalamus has its own rhythm?
Yes,
Because
that's
you say it resonates. I was born and raised in the Netherlands. My family comes from Indonesia. When the first time I went to Asia, something special happened. I stepped out of. I just blended in. It was there.
Yeah.
So for me, the story,
Yeah.
I think it took the rhythm of my parents and not where I was raised. So
Yeah, the first person who ever facilitated inner dance in the Netherlands was actually an Indonesian Dutch lady.
okay.
She did a training in 2012. A yoga teacher who just like really who owned a yoga space, and there was something about her east-west balance that really got it.
Yeah.
She was the first model out of that. That's ancient history. So what you're speaking is actually quite beautiful. We all began in Africa, and then now we're cousins. We separated. We all have different colors.
I've read somewhere that the circadian rhythms are controlled 50% by biology and 50% by the surroundings. So there are rhythms that are somewhere else.
It depends on the home you grew up in as well. Like everything that people were eating established the rhythm. To make it, I think, a little bit more graphic, when we say everyone or everything has a rhythm, that means everything has a cycle. But a cycle, according to what we're looking at, is actually a collection of rhythms. How are people coordinating when it's okay to go high or low? So I come from a place in the world that's near the equator. Every single day, we know that the sun will go down at that time. It doesn't matter what day of the month. And then I come here in June, and I'm so confused. So that's not a one rhythm. And here, you know what I mean. So it's more or less understanding what is your story that is rhythmic, which is actually a collection of many rhythms, and then how is that like changing?
It's interesting if we think like the hypothalamus or the really old part of the brain, and then like Finnish people being here like tens of thousands of years, we're the number one coffee consuming culture in the world. So because we also come from Africa, and then we move up north here, and then we have to drink so much coffee, which is still done in Africa or Asia, somewhere there, because coffee doesn't grow here, and we drink it like the whole winter like crazy, but also summer like crazy. So it's like we're still, we're mixing up our system, and then we might have these really old parts, but then we're super thousands of years acclimatized to north. But then we also have our tropical parts where I feel like home in Philippines, because I think it's even more something older parts of me than so it's really and then how we mixed up everything nowadays with substances. Like every Finnish person is just caffeinated, and then alcohol, to keep a balance.
I want to bring a layer to that really functional question about how does rhythm affect the hypothalamus. I think we would still need to connect the old brain or the basal ganglia brain with the hypothalamus. So this is still the part of the brain that is responsible for addiction. Dopamine, glutamate, and GABA being sent out from the subcortical regions then sends messages to the hypothalamus. So here's me self-correcting myself on the spot. Maybe the one ring that rules them all would be the addiction pathways, which establishes another kind of rhythm that's more conditioned. You know what I mean? So the brain's thought to be more complex than the universe. It's a lot more complex than the universe, which almost doesn't make sense. So there are these interesting connections that we are affecting. So it would be good to keep that in mind with a statement uttered yesterday that rhythm affects the basal ganglia. Earlier in the table we were talking about the reptilians, the Queen of England. The basal ganglia is called the reptilian brain. It's our brains when we were lizards. So music affects the reptilian brain more than maybe any other part of the brain. And then the mechanisms that it sends out to inform the rest of the system would be dopamine, glutamate, GABA, oxytocin, serotonin, adrenaline, noradrenaline, cortisol, all of which either stimulate or depress. It's just up or down. So to make that more exact, the rhythm is timed by the basal ganglia. The basal ganglia has rhythmic tendencies. It has preferred pulse rates, which in music is normally called BPM, and on the brain waves it's called hertz, or how many cycles per second. So again, that I think helps to substantiate the work in terms of why are we doing what we're doing. This is giving you a lot of power. It actually is giving you a lot of control over losing control. this is a lot of information, and a lot of it's actually quite new, even to neuroscience. This will give you so much to work with, whether it be people facilitating already or people interested in this. Because it's now seems so simple. Okay, is that what it is? It's not so mystical as I thought. You know, you don't need to come in there and like, okay. You can systematize this. You can scale this. It will shock you every time you hear the feedback. And a lot of this is being shared only now. A lot of this is missing in even my past trainings. I gave some of the basics, but the formulations, and we will go into more and more the next days. This is only this year. So see what you can do with it, because there are a lot of people who are doing amazing things with very little. So if you get more, what did you do with it? Show us. I think that's enough, just to make sure that you don't explode just yet. So we'll go into lunch soon.
No, 30 minutes. Yeah.
But this is already quite a lot. We'll go into maybe more practice later. It's really interesting. Okay, I took this in. How do I observe this? How do I go into the laboratory? It's really hard to go into the journey with the knowledge and not start to notice things. Okay, there is a clock. There is time. The body is holding time. Rhythm organizes time. They all start to make clicking noises. I connect this with that. When structures are given, that's when you start noticing things. When everything's general, everything's energy, everything is Shakti. You're going in a loop. But when you go into the structures, that's called literacy. And what we're doing here is energetic literacy or spiritual epistemology, where vibration as well has structures. Later on, we need to connect this with the music, and I think a lot of you are excited to go into the tools. Okay, here are the frameworks, and what are the tools that brings the experiences about? What are the best ones? What are the simple ones? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.